People, it is the 2nd of February. Welcome to Newspaper Breakdown. We've got a number of stories to go through, I reckon a lot of interesting ones. We'll start with the Bank of England. They have increased interest rates by half a percentage point to a 15-year high of 4% and signalled potential further increases depending on economic data. This is the 10th consecutive rate hike. This is a continuation of trying to tackle high inflation. If you put interest rates up, you make borrowing more expensive, and the idea is that people will save more and not spend more. And if you're spending less, supply and demand will mean that the prices of things go down, inflation goes down. The Monetary Policy Committee dropped some of its more aggressive language, adding further rate rises would only be needed if there were new signs that inflation would stay high for too long. The new language suggests interest rates may have peaked at 4%, which is lower than the expected 4.5%, potentially making the recession less damaging than expected. So, touch of a silver lining. Potentially the recession is going to bugger us, isn't going to bugger us for as long and as deep as was expected. You've also got next piece of news is the oil and gas firm Shell. Their annual profits more than doubled in 2022 to $40 billion. Do you think that the likes of Shell, when they announced this, do you think they've got any awkward feeling, something akin to shame when they're saying that, when they're announcing that they've doubled their profits to $40 billion? Their profits were boosted by the surge in wholesale gas prices due to the war in Ukraine. The majority of their profits, of course, comes at the same time as a cost of living crisis, recessions around the world, and they've made the majority of their money from people dying. This is why I ask if they feel shame or a bit of awkwardness when they announce such a thing. In October, this will allow you to suggest not. In October, Shell said that it had paid no UK windfall tax up to that point. Shell has confirmed today that they had taken a $1.9 billion charge relating to windfall taxes in the UK and the EU, although they haven't said how much of it goes where. Of course, we need more windfall tax at this point. If they're making double the amount of money that they've made previously, and previously they were making fucking tons, we need to do more for the windfall tax. It is unfair and basically cruel that these companies can make so much money off of the dead. I think it's fucking vulgar. Shell has also been accused of overstating how much it is spending on renewables and faced calls this week to be investigated and potentially fined by the financial regulator in the US to add to their absolutely delightful fucking business. Potentially, they are also lying about the amount of money that they are putting into renewables, because all of these countries keep on saying how much they're doing for renewables. But if you actually look at it, you'll tend to find that they're spending more money on marketing about how much they're doing in renewables instead of actually doing anything in fucking renewables. Comparative to the amount of money that they continue to put in to oil and gas, it is nothing. It's a piss in the ocean. It will continue with Shell, though, because more than 11,000 residents of Nigeria's oil-producing Niger Delta have filed a claim for compensation against Shell in the High Court in London. This is a long-running case that will test multinational companies' responsibilities for environmental damage overseas. This is the claim from the Ogale community, which adds to the one brought by members of the Abile community in 2015, bringing a total number of people seeking compensation to 13,652. They claim that oil spills resulting from Shell's operations in the region have contaminated the water, harmed air pollution, and destroyed farmland and fishing stocks. So in 2021, the UK Supreme Court ruled that UK listed Shell exercised significant control over its Nigerian subsidy and could be legally responsible in British courts. Shell had argued that the case should be heard by courts in Nigeria. Now, why they would prefer to do courts in Nigeria than in Britain, who's to say? I'm not going to speculate that it's owing to their ability to pay to get a better result for themselves, although that would be my guess. As I say, not for me to say. The trial is expected to start next year, and it is the latest case against Shell over its environmental record in Nigeria. It could establish precedent for the responsibility of international oil and gas companies for past pollution. If this happens and it goes through, it will be fantastic. If Shell lose, it will be fucking brilliant, because it will allow communities in poorer countries to finally be able to hold these companies that have stripped them of their natural resources, that have bent them over, put in air pollution, destroyed their fucking water, their way of life, and actually be able to hold them responsible for their actions. In 2011, the United Nations Environment Programme concluded that the contamination of drinking water in Ogoniland, a region that included the Ogo community, represented an immediate danger to public health. There is a good chance I have screwed up the pronunciation of some of these places. I apologise, I read them, so I haven't heard what they actually are. I tried to look online, but it all came O'Gale, and I'm not 100% sure if it is O'Gale. You can question why I didn't say O'Gale previously and I said O'Galley, because fuck it, I'm not sure. So maybe I'll just try all the different types of pronunciation and I'll get it right once. So yes, the immediate danger to public health, the UN Environmental Programme called on Shell's Nigerian subsidy, which is the SPDC, to conduct a huge cleanup operation. Shell stopped oil and gas production in the area in 1993 amid community protests over environmental damage. So this is like 30 years ago. People were aware of what was going on. But the SPDC pipelines still cross the region, which is where you get into oil spillages, which have affected the water, the air, crops, fish. The $1 billion cleanup project, which is funded by Shell and the Nigerian National Oil Company, has begun. But of course, because it wouldn't be that easy, it is mired in allegations of corruption and mismanagement. So this will be interesting to see. As I say, the trial's coming in next year, which is, you would want it to be earlier, but we all know we've got major problems in our judiciary as it is, especially with backlogs. But if they manage to win, it could be quite a game changer. I doubt they're going to win because I don't think there's fairness in life, but it would be nice, wouldn't it? So, next story. After the government accepted a Lib Dem amendment, taxpayer money may no longer be invested in water companies that fail to produce adequate plans to stop sewage discharges. This is something that, quite frankly, should have been in place ages ago, and with every company we give money to, we should have contracts that make sure that they cannot bend us over. Train firms, private companies in the NHS, water companies. If we're subsidising, we should have contracts that say this is what you must do. You must put money into infrastructure. You can't cover the country in shit. Simple rules. The change to the UK Infrastructure Bank Bill means that once it becomes law, tax receipts will only be able to fund water companies if they produce a costed and timed plan for ending sewage spills into waterways. This is a good thing. This is good news. As I say, a bit late, but it is good news. The problem you see there is the Lib Dems had to bring in this amendment. This isn't the Tories' idea, this isn't the government's idea. The government allowed it to go through, but at no point in their breadth of thought did they think of holding a company to account. The UK Infrastructure Bank is a state-owned development bank designed to help the UK government reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. I am old enough to remember when we were looking at doing it by 2030, but you know, everything changes. We'll continue with water companies though, because there's another story on water companies, not as upbeat. The likes of Severn Trent, United Utilities and Thames Water have been sent thousands of written warnings by the Environment Agency. 9 water companies and 1 recycling group were issued more than 2,800 warning letters, civil sanctions and enforcement notices for suspected offences between 2015 to 2022. Sorry. The number of annual prosecutions by the EA fell from 800-ish in 2007 to 2008 to, drumroll please, speak properly you dick, to 17 in 2020 to 21. And as we can all see, it's not because they got better. Water companies haven't improved, they are quite literally pouring shit into our waters. But the prosecutions have drastically fallen. I mean, this is with years of funding cuts. Once again, you have to look at austerity for this. It's stripped the Environment Agency from its ability to hold water companies to account. Once again, and it's one of the truisms of the past 12, 13 years, is austerity has done the most damage to this country. Then, for me, than anything, Brexit isn't as damaging as austerity. Because if austerity didn't happen and we put money into the economy instead of trying to constantly cut public services, we would have more functioning services. It would be better, more useful. Got 1, 2, 3 stories left. An investigation found that British Gas sent debt collectors who broke into customers' homes to install prepayment meters. The boss of Centrica, that owns British Gas, has apologised, said there was no excuse, will not try to justify any, has set up an independent inquiry. It's good. That's what you want. You want someone who's coming in and just saying, no, I'm not justifying this. This is awful. This is terrible. It should not have happened. Whether or not he believes it, who knows? But it's nice for someone to actually say it. Ofgem, which is the regulator, Ofgem have launched an urgent investigation into the Times newspaper report. Times journalists went undercover to find out this story. Fantastic work by that journalist. The debt collecting company that British Gas used had forced their way into homes to fit the device despite children and disabled people living there. You can currently get a warrant to force fit a prepayment meter. According to the Citizens Advice Bureau, an estimated 3.2 million people last year could not or had their energy cut off from using a prepayment meter because they could not afford it when it ran out. They couldn't afford to top it up, leaving them with nothing. It's terrible that we're at a point where this is allowed. Like, I get, like, at the very end, you've tried everything, you've done your very best. British Gas have said, right, these are all the options, you need to start paying some money that you can afford, we need to do something. I understand if they've done that, but they haven't done. They say, right, the only thing we can do is prepayment meter. But they don't do. It's not the final choice. It is in the top fucking 3 of choices, and it shouldn't be. So what British Gas are doing is basically going fucking door to door with a locksmith, breaking into homes and taking away people's energy, which in this world at the moment kills. That's what it does. I've said it before, we need more options to punish businesses. Because you can't put a business into a jail, the options are limited. Two more stories. A new report by the Trade Union Congress suggested that due to the mass public spending cuts by the last few Tory governments, Britain missed out on £400 billion of growth since 2010, which is when we had the coalition, and George Osborne decided that the best way to help the country was to make sure we had nothing of value. The extension of austerity and wage restrictions until 2027, which is the government's latest budget brought out, which was austerity 2.0. That proposal looks to almost double the missing growth to 900 billion by 2027. And if we had remained at our pre-1979 growth rate, GDP would be £2 trillion higher. This is just another story. Now, you have to first take into account that the Trade Union Congress will not be there to praise the government. That's not what they're there to do. They have used economists to do all of these figures, though, and they can back all of their figures. With numbers, you can always look at numbers a different way. So it could be that another economist has a look at this and said, actually, it's not 400 billion that we have missed out on. It's not going to be 900 billion that we've missed out on. It's not £2 trillion worth of growth that we've missed out on. It's actually in 1 trillion. It could be that. But the facts is that having the Tories in power for the past 13 years has been a detriment to this country. Simple as that. Final story is going to be on Boris Johnson, that pile of shit. The National Audit Office, which is the government spending watchdog, are examining the decision to give £220,000 of taxpayers' money to Boris Johnson to fund his legal defence for the inquiry into his Partygate denials. The NAO have yet to decide if they are going to mount a formal investigation. But since 2022, since October 2022, Boris Johnson has declared earnings of over £2 million on top of his MP salary. So the question there lies is, why are we giving him the money? He doesn't need it. He is not doing his job as an MP, and he's going around the country, around the world, earning fucking tons. He does not pay for where he lives. We keep on hearing stories about everyone giving him fucking loans every 4 seconds. All of his holidays are paid for, and now we are paying for him to defend himself for lying to us. Where's the win for us there? Where's the plus point? Where's this, our Tories are great with money bollocks? Where's the fairness? Where's the justice? They cut legal aid to make it harder for people without money to get justice. But this rich prick gets all the money he needs to defend himself for lying, continually telling us how proud he is that 150,000 plus people died of COVID when he was in charge. And that's important to remember. The Tories are happy with the amount of people that died. Even though it was more than the majority of the world, they are happy about it. That's enough. That's enough. I will talk to you all tomorrow.